Robbie and I'm the founder of a sort of local portal called bit.coin.je here in Jersey and Channel Islands. And really my interest around that project is to act as a focal point for both on-island and off-island views, so they can see what's happening and generally get more of a consensus of what people on island want to be doing, so we can go to parts of government and lobby them, and generally from off islands so people can see what's going on here. I've been running a local kind of tech meetup for a while, and with another couple of guys, and we were standing in the pub and someone was arguing about whose round it was, and someone said, "Oh, why don't you try and pay in Bitcoin?" to this other guy, and I was like, "What the hell's Bitcoin?" And it took like an hour or so to explain, because this was like 2011, and it was something I didn't really grasp straight away, but I was aware of, and I decided to look a bit more into it. But like the guy who we were, taking the piss off, he basically sat me down and went, this and this. And I have a background in sort of infosec, so I understand crypto to a certain part, and I was quite interested how that was merging with the whole approach to the blockchain and how it did those. So I did the usual thing, tried mining on a standard PC, and didn't really do that well even back then. And then one of the really early British exchanges, I think it was Bitjoin, I sort of dabbled with some stuff through there, and it was really just something I kind of did and then forgot about for maybe a year and a half, and it started all picking up again in the media, and thought I'd dig out that hard drive, see what's there, and found a couple, so I thought, okay, this is now worth a bit more of my time to look at. And it really went from there that Jersey has such a massive finance industry based here, and if it's not finance, it's service based, so like accountants, lawyers, all around that kind of thing. And my general day-to-day work as a kind of consultant on technology, I'm more and more aware of a lot of services are becoming automated, and these sectors are going to change drastically, if not dry up. And you look at the potential for Bitcoin and blockchain-based tech to completely disrupt, those sectors. It's something that I felt people in business over here should be made aware of, or at least have a point that they could come and find out more information. So that was really a kind of plan to get some international traffic and eyes on us, because at the time and still, like the cryptocurrency industry as a thing is looking for a home in the world. Like there's not really been one jurisdiction that's ticked all the boxes and has offered the sort of framework for businesses to grow around. And there are better jurisdictions than others, and certain ones are saying they're going to do a lot. So we thought, okay, well there's a lot of sense around Jersey being a player in this space. I remember going to the London Bitcoin Expo like a couple of years back, and it was around the time that someone was announcing that Alderney was going to be doing a commemorative coin that was going to be linked to Bitcoin and fiat, and it got on the front page of the FT, and it came out it was more of a PR stunt and it never really happened. But the interesting thing is that a lot of people were starting to discuss around it, even though it's more of a PR thing. The Channel Islands would be quite an interesting place to be pushing this, technology, because they're well regulated. They've got close ties to the UK and Europe, but they're not in either. There's a good comms infrastructure. There's lots of stuff that was kind of hitting the crypto space and making sense. So we thought, okay, well, first of all, it was a case of see what else is going on locally. So organised a couple of meetups, did a couple of talks as part of that tech work group that I was doing some stuff with, and met a couple of miners who have been doing stuff locally for a while, met some people who are interested in it from a sort of trading point of view, and there turned out to be a fair amount of people doing stuff locally. So it was more of a case of, okay, let's pool our ideas and see what we can do and push this a bit further as a more formal entity. The first couple of meetings we had with there are several bodies that are responsible for certain things locally. The main one is the JFSE, the Jersey Financial Services Commission. So if you have a business, you have to register it with them, and they approve licenses for certain financial instruments. So it got to a point that we were talking with them and a couple of the other bodies and some parts of government and some other industry bodies. And it was more of a research piece, because a lot of people just didn't have a point of reference. They said, okay, well, we'll treat it as a commodity, or we'll treat it as a digital voucher and things like that. And very early on, because we were slightly behind the curve for certain other jurisdictions, we could say, no, that's not the right way to approach this. We need to allow this thing to grow, because you look at what HMRC did in the UK, and they said, okay, it's VAT taxable on each transaction. That set back the UK crypto industry, at least a year or so, and they've caught up. But it was because a body of industry lobbied them and said, okay, well, this is wrong and this is why. So I think that's taken a while. Getting regulators want to fit things in boxes, and if something doesn't, or it could easily fit in about 7 or so, then they have to rethink things. And we've basically worked out what can be done at the moment inside those pre-existing areas, and what needs a bit more work, and what needs a bit more education. So that's ongoing. They've produced a couple of research papers about that, but obviously they're really, really careful that they don't want to be encouraging bad actors, or encouraging abuse of regulations. And for all the people that we've met locally, everyone seems to be in the same boat. They want to build actual businesses rather than just loopholes and things like that. Because again, attracting crypto businesses to the island would increase the talent pool and draw more focus, and you can't really do that by saying, well, there's this loophole that exists and it will exist for a couple of months, so come on over for a bit. And it's not really what Jersey wants to be doing. So the exact position is that they haven't got an exact position. So they are due to, probably in the next week or so, release a research piece that they've been doing for the last 6 months, and it's part of an overall structure of. They'd started doing a big long-term research piece on virtual money and for the tax implications of that, but the crypto side kind of added a lot more work for the research piece for that. So that's taken a while. But there are certain things that the tax department clarified probably about a year ago how they would tax cryptocurrency-based transactions, and they wouldn't. They'd just tax them on the part that goes into fiat, and whether it's the amount that you'd be doing in fiat, that's what they tax you on. So they don't care if the transaction was in potatoes, they'll tax you on the fiat amount. So that was made very clear. There's been some commentary by the Consumer Council, so just outlining the risks for the consumer for using this type of thing. If you wanted a refund, would the shopkeeper be automatically doing it in the crypto that you did it in, or would it be in the fiat amount at the time of purchase, or the fiat amount at the time of refund? So just putting more of these guidelines in place. The general consensus behind the approach is there's a lot of areas that are very interested in it, and I think that there's been a couple of actual things that have come out, but there's a lot more thought processes going behind it, and just trying to work out where the opportunities are. But when we first started asking around, seeing who's up for kind of discussing this and things, we probably had a core of about 8 or 9 people that we knew were doing stuff in the space, and since then it's grown to a regular kind of 30-40 people. There's probably a lot more that have turned up to the more general workshops. So we have run like more community-focused meetups. So you come along and you discuss whatever you want to, and it might be various happenings in the news, or just kind of doing walkthroughs of how to use certain new systems and things. But the Jersey industry body, Digital Jersey, has run a number of workshops around more an education to other industries. So those have been attended by like about 150 people, and they've been really well received, because when I first started this, there was a lot of, you hear the word Bitcoin, you probably associate it with Silk Road or various nefarious purposes, and you get kind of asked to leave. Whereas very quickly that changed from I'm now being asked about this by people I respect and in my industry, and I need to find out more, to a point that it's not really about understanding how Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies work, it's about how they could work from a business point of view. So the transition over about a year and a half has been really interesting. A really varied amount. So you'll get some, say from the finance industry, you'll get juniors who have read about this, and they're probably keeping on top of general industry news because it benefits their career, and they just want to ask questions, so they seem knowledgeable. But you'll also have CTOs and CFOs coming along because they see it as something that potentially could affect their business in the long run, but also is something they need to know about. From a technology point of view, you're getting more traditional developers just kind of, once they grab the basics of how it works, they then can fit in some kind of way of that it affects their working. So if they do a lot of freelance work, they suddenly have a payment mechanism, they can get paid anywhere in the world. If they are dealing with auditing, they suddenly have something they can hash into the blockchain, and you have a mutable record for prosperity, which is something they can think about when they're architecting systems, whereas previously that would have been, okay, you have to have these kind of backup systems. So there's a lot of interesting points. It's never really the same approach, which is really, really refreshing. I think when we first started pushing, start of 2014, it was fairly easy to get people interested because it was in the news, the price was going up, there were set ways of getting out to fiat. That's improved, but there still isn't a GBP native offline version. So you can't say, right, BitPay accept GBP, but you can't do it for small transactions because you have to have £1,000 out before you go out. And so the businesses that we've managed to onboard are more early pilot schemes that we have some kind of existing arrangement with. So like the pubs and shops that do, we've gone to, and they already are interested in Bitcoin. They just say, yeah, okay, well, so the pub that we onboarded first, we had a CoinKite ethos, and we said, okay, well, we'll happily let you use this if we can use that as a pilot scheme in your pub, and that's been working quite well. The more business side of things, it's a lot easier to integrate online payments through Bitcoin, so you're less relying on someone educating the user that, you can pay in Bitcoin. It's if they are going to pay in Bitcoin, you can easily let them. So that's been a lot easier, especially now Shopify make it easier, and with Stripe. But it's definitely it's either slowed down, or we haven't really been pushing that hard, because we see that until certain problems are solved, like a UK bank allowing faster payments from an exchange or a payment processor, it's going to be very hard for someone to go, this is better than credit cards because the transaction fee is less, but it has to stay in this currency for a while until I reach a period and I can get out. But generally there's a number which is getting better. I think what's far more interesting is the amount of people that are coming to me and wanting to find out how to buy Bitcoin or some other cryptos from a personal standpoint, because they just want to play with it first. And we've seen people do that, and then 6 months later say, yeah, of course I'll accept this for my business because it's good PR and I wouldn't say that there's a massive amount of transactions that will go through those businesses in Bitcoin, but there are some. And I think the more people that understand that it's this pilot process that, there's a lot of emphasis on Jersey being a good pilot area anyway, because it's the mini UK. We have a similar sized populace and similar split, and being able to run pilot schemes from a tech point of view in a controlled area is quite useful. So there's been a lot more focus on that of, okay, the KYC system that I've been working with on the Lamassu we have, that isn't purely to service that one Lamassu. It's going to be, can we get this working to a point that we can then ship it out or license it or run more ATMs or as a bigger part of that. So I think it's just generally enough people locally were interested early on in Bitcoin to have enough Bitcoin to then play with, which is quite interesting, because then you just have more people wanting to see what's possible. Definitely the education and the consulting on education in general. So whether it's a person just asking, which wallets would you recommend, or what's the best way to back up your wallet, or things, or to a traditional finance entity, bank, trust company, whatever, saying we've been asked to look at this. Can you spend half a day or whatever coming and chatting to us? Generally, the amount of information around that you can give is completely dependent on the questions. So because they're quite varied, it makes it a lot more useful for from my point of view, because I need to be able to talk about it fairly comprehensively, as well as the other guys I'm doing this with. It's not just me. So there's from a sort of entity point of view, there's several government-sponsored bodies. There's Jersey Business, which is like, it looks after business formation and kind of startup help. There's the technical industry body called Digital Jersey, and then there's the finance side, which is Jersey Finance. Generally, the Digital Jersey have been very proactive in this, so they've been working alongside us to do a couple of, as I said, workshops. They also have been working on a couple of research papers with the regulator. Because of that, certain civil servants and politicians have had an interest, and there's a general push to try and grow the technical sector over here, and the obvious link between the two is financial tech. So if you then say, well, what's the one that we can actually get a bit of footing on fairly quickly? Cryptocurrency came up very early on as something that, if the regulator can give us some frameworks around that, we can look at the fastest ways to market, and that's caused a lot of growth in certain ideas, which has been really good. I think there was a very early on kind of pushback of, we don't want anything to do with this publicly because of the risks involved for reputation. But after seeing other jurisdictions with a lot more to lose have been heavily pushing this, also with certain other competitors in the offshore space. I've met with the Isle of Man guys a couple of times over expos and things, and it's always asked, you guys in competition with us, and the more people doing stuff for Bitcoin, the better it is for all of us. I think each jurisdiction is going to have its certain strengths, where you can either do things quicker, or you have more trust because you've been doing certain things longer, or there's certain movements the Isle of Man have done which have been really good from a PR point of view, but they don't yet have a GBP native bank willing to work with them, and these are problems that all UK and UK dependencies are going to have. But I think the more they're working very closely with the UK DCA. We're in talks with the UK DCA about partnering our sort of entity with them. So I think the more common a message that can be done for the industry, that we can say, okay, it's fairly irrelevant if a company is based somewhere, as long as the services are available to people. Now, certain people are going to say no. Obviously, the Isle of Man are going to want a business to be based there, or New Jersey are going to want a business based there. But from my point of view, as long as they're based somewhere that opens up services to users, that's all I really care about. I don't think there's any specific cases. There have been, so in Jersey, every bank here has to be one of the top 500 in the world, so they're subsidiaries of that. So you've got the interesting position where every bank is answering to a parent entity. So there hasn't been a lot of progressive movement around that, because obviously they have to then look upwards and go, well, is it okay if we open a bank account with this? And that's still a global problem, I think. What has been more interesting is the interest around funds and trust companies to look at, okay, if the banks aren't willing to engage with these type of things, maybe there's something else that can be done around that. From their point of view, and we've had a number of inquiries around that space. I think the really interesting point comes back to Jersey as a pilot scheme. If you're a big bank and you know that this thing isn't going away and you want to be doing some pilot schemes or R&D or whatever, you do then have your subsidiary in a well-regulated island that you can go and say, actually, well, we can get some really accurate numbers on this and maybe scale this up. And I think that's probably what we're going to see in the near future. Is you are reading about more and more of the mainline banks doing research pieces, and if there's a gap for one to say, okay, we'll do it in Jersey, I think that would be a very obvious route to market. It's a good question. I think the problem is that for people to understand a trustless network takes a fair amount of understanding. Like, you need to understand certain technical principles, because generally your average man in the street goes, of course we trust that the bank isn't going to delete our money and whatever, and whether that's right or wrong, but especially somewhere slightly more stable like Jersey, there's a lot of trust that is just inherent, and people think, of course I trust this third party that I'm dealing with. I think in other parts of the world that it's a bit more easy to explain to someone that, right, that thing you don't already trust because it screws up a lot. Well, this is a thing that doesn't require any trust because it just happens. Either, the transaction is either sent or it isn't. There isn't you sent it and it never arrived. And I think that, there's always going to be an element that want cryptocurrencies to be completely outside the current systems. But I think to make it grow to the point that we're getting more and more adoption, they're going to have to be certain points that is completely false. You need entities like Circle that are more traditional and are asking more AML and KYC questions, but they offer a service that is available to more people. So we've not really had many people locally stand up at the kind of really anarchistic kind of outside, but that could be that they don't want to come and talk to any of us because they're doing something they don't want to do. I mean, there have been certain court cases go through the local courts where people have bought things off dark web markets and they've got caught, and Bitcoin was used as a payment process. But I think that there's always going to be a point where people think this is a better way of doing things. I mean, from my point of view, I deal a lot with usability, and that comes back to me. If I can pay someone as easy as I can send an email, and it gets them as easy as an email would, then that's a system I want to use. I mean, that's why everyone uses Skype and FaceTime now, as opposed to paying for long distance phone calls. It's just a better way of doing things, and I think that it's going to force a lot of traditional banks and finance companies to really change how they interact with the customer, and you're starting to see that with a lot more banks having mobile apps and a lot more banks operating in a more kind of appy, web-based way. But it's going to get to a point where people say, okay, well actually I want slightly more control over this, or when was it RBS's ATM network went down last year and no one could use it for 3 or 4 days. That really affects people, and that reliance on a centralised service for something as important as the money you need to pay rent and buy food and things. I think that's when you're probably going to see more people going back. That's only ever going to get worse, and you're going to get more people going back to having other ways of payment, whether it's they keep cash or they keep valuables or they look at Bitcoin. You see that in other parts of the world, and I think the UK maybe not so much, but Europe definitely is going to start going down that way. So I think it was really a very quick project to put up online and see we could start talking about something. So we're in the process of creating the Jersey Digital Currency Association. So that will be more formalised, and we can then have a recognised body that we can go to and lobby things. As far as the community side, we, part of the work I do with another sort of tech group called Tech Tribes, they, along with another entity called collaborate.je, ran a hackathon recently, and it's the second one we've done. And this one was focused on fintech, and so we didn't want to make it crypto heavy, but we knew the people that were entering were wanting to do crypto-based projects. So we were lucky enough to get a local sponsor from KPMG and a couple of the other technology firms, and the Gabi, the Bitcoin investment fund, put up some Bitcoin as a prize fund, and we were off the back of that. We were lucky enough to speak to Satoshi Labs, and they gave us some treasures. So it was fairly crypto heavy, and without pushing people too much, we had 13 teams, and I think about 9 were in some way crypto based, which was really, really good from my point of view, because they were all quite varied and they were using it in certain ways. So it could be that someone wanted a reward mechanism that was automated. You just can't do that easily over 36 hours with traditional payment, but you can very easily with Bitcoin. So I think what's going to be very interesting is, I know off the back of that, at least 3 of those projects have now been formalised into companies, or are being, and they're going to be going ahead with continuing the prototyping, and because they're using Bitcoin in various different ways, it's going to be quite interesting that this output coming from the island in a varied way, not just they're all payment processors or they're all secure storage. I think it's going to be quite interesting. I predicted that Bitcoin will be back up to 1,000 US by the end of the year, and that was last year, and that clearly didn't happen. So for me, I think we're going to see a lot more user-friendly apps and interfaces coming out. So continuing the vein of BitPay being very easy to set up a merchant with, Circle being very easy for someone to set up a wallet with. There's going to obviously be concerns about, are you sacrificing security for ease? And I think that's where you're just kind of going back to the older systems. So I think the ones that are going to succeed are the ones that are obviously introducing multi-sig, and the ones that are allowing third-party audits to happen, and you're seeing that already, and I think that's really good. I think the other thing is you're going to have just really interesting ways of using this as not just a payment, but as a transaction method. So the whole colour coins movement, and generally looking at if people understand how the blockchain can be used, and the way that it buries things underneath each other. You're going to see auditing systems pop up. You're going to see services around analysing the blockchain. I think that's going to be a growth area, especially when the big data and data science companies start looking at, okay, there's a need for this for analysis. Now that analysis could be for market trends, it could be for security, but I think that's going to be a growth area.